The Anderson family lived in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. John Anderson worked as a senior manager at a large company, while Sarah taught at a local elementary school. They had two children, Michael, who was 17, and Emma, who was 14. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. They lived in a beautiful house with a large backyard, drove nice cars, and spent weekends together as a family. Their neighbors often said they were the kind of family everyone wished they could be. But behind the smiles and happy family photos, there was a secret that had been hidden for nearly 20 years. One cold Friday evening, John arrived home later than usual. He looked nervous and distracted. During dinner, he barely touched his food. Sarah noticed something was wrong, but she waited until the children left the table before asking questions. "John, what happened?" she asked quietly. John looked at her for a moment before reaching into his briefcase and pulling out an old yellow envelope. "I received this today," he said. Sarah frowned. "What is it?" "I don't know. There was no return address." He handed her the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. The moment Sarah saw it, the color drained from her face. The picture showed three people standing in front of a small wooden cabin deep in the woods. One of them was a much younger John. Another was Sarah. The third person neither of their children had ever heard about. On the back of the photo, someone had written a message in black ink. "The truth cannot stay buried forever. I'm coming back." Sarah's hands began to shake. "That's impossible," she whispered. "That's what I thought. But someone knows what happened that night." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. 20 years ago, during a summer trip in the mountains, something happened near that cabin, something they had promised never to tell anyone. Something so serious that they had spent 2 decades pretending it never happened. Upstairs, Michael was walking toward the kitchen when he overheard part of the conversation. He stopped near the stairs and listened carefully. "The kids can never find out," Sarah said. Michael's heart began to race. Find out what? Before he could hear more, John suddenly looked toward the hallway, as if he sensed someone nearby. Michael quickly stepped back and hurried to his room. That night, a powerful storm rolled across the city. Rain slammed against the windows, and thunder shook the house. Around midnight, Michael woke up after hearing a strange sound outside. He walked to his bedroom window and looked down into the street. A black SUV was parked directly across from their house. Its engine was running, and someone inside was watching the Anderson home. Michael kept staring through the rain-covered window. The black SUV remained parked across the street, its headlights off, but its engine still running. He tried to convince himself that it was just a neighbor or someone lost in the storm, but something about it felt wrong. After watching for several minutes, he finally returned to bed. When he looked outside again the next morning, the vehicle was gone. At breakfast, everything seemed normal. John was reading the news on his tablet, Sarah was preparing pancakes, and Emma was talking about a school project. Yet Michael could not stop thinking about what he had heard the night before. "The kids can never find out." The words echoed in his mind. Later that afternoon, while helping his mother clean the garage, Michael noticed an old metal storage box hidden behind several dusty containers. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Curiosity got the better of him. As soon as Sarah stepped back into the house to answer a phone call, he carefully opened the box. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a worn leather journal. Michael flipped through the journal and immediately noticed that many pages had been torn out. The remaining pages described a summer trip that his parents had taken nearly 20 years earlier. Most entries were ordinary, talking about hiking trails and camping, but then the journal suddenly ended. The last complete sentence read, "If anyone ever discovers what happened at the cabin, our lives will never be the same." Michael's pulse quickened. Just then, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the journal and shoved everything back into the box moments before Sarah returned. That evening, John received another envelope. This time, there was no photograph, only a note. 3 days. Nothing else. No name, no explanation. John crushed the paper in his hand. Sarah looked terrified. "Maybe we should tell them," she said quietly. "No," John replied immediately. "Not yet." "What if this person comes here?" John had no answer. For the first time in many years, he looked genuinely afraid. That night, Michael decided he needed answers.
After everyone went to sleep, he snuck downstairs and entered his father's home office. He searched through drawers until he found a locked cabinet. To his surprise, the key was hanging on a hook nearby. Inside the cabinet were dozens of documents. Most were old and unimportant. Then he found a file labeled Mountain View Incident Confidential. He opened it. The first page contained a police report dated 20 years ago. According to the report, a man named Daniel Carter had disappeared near a remote cabin in the mountains. Despite an extensive search, no trace of him had ever been found. Michael turned to the next page. His breath stopped. Attached to the report was a photograph of Daniel Carter standing beside young John and Sarah, the same man from the mysterious photograph. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him. A floorboard creaked. He slowly turned around. Someone was standing in the doorway, watching him, and it wasn't his father. Michael froze. The dim light from the desk lamp barely illuminated the figure standing in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. His heart pounded so hard that he could hear it in his ears. Then the person stepped forward. It was Emma. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Michael let out a breath of relief. "You scared me to death." "I should be asking you that," Emma replied. "Why are you sneaking around Dad's office in the middle of the night?" Michael hesitated before showing her the file. Within minutes, he told her everything he had discovered: the strange envelopes, the photograph, the hidden journal, and the missing man named Daniel Carter. Emma's eyes widened with every detail. "You think Mom and Dad are hiding something? I know they are." The two siblings sat silently for a moment, staring at the police report. Then Emma noticed something. "Look at the last page." Michael flipped to the back of the file. There was a map. A red circle had been drawn around a location deep in the mountains. Beside it, someone had written a single word: cabin. The next morning, Michael and Emma acted as if nothing had happened, but they spent the entire day thinking about the map. By evening, they had made a decision. They were going to find that cabin. The following Saturday, they told their parents they were spending the day with friends. Instead, they borrowed camping supplies, packed food, and drove towards the mountains using directions from the map. The trip took nearly 6 hours. As the city disappeared behind them, the roads became narrower and the forests grew thicker. Eventually, they reached a dirt road that wound through the wilderness. The atmosphere felt strange, almost abandoned. After another hour, they found it. The cabin. It stood alone among towering pine trees. Its windows were broken. The wooden walls were weathered and gray. It looked like no one had lived there for decades. Michael and Emma exchanged nervous glances before stepping inside. Dust covered everything. Old furniture lay scattered across the floor. Broken glass crunched beneath their shoes. For nearly an hour, they searched every room. They found nothing. Then Emma noticed that one section of the floor looked different. The wooden boards appeared newer than the rest. "Michael," she called quietly, "come here." Together they moved an old table and examined the floor. Underneath was a metal ring attached to a hidden wooden hatch. Michael pulled it open. A cold draft rushed upward. Below them was a narrow staircase leading underground. Neither of them spoke. Every instinct told them to leave. Instead, they turned on their flashlights and began descending. The stairs led to a small underground room. At first, it looked empty. Then, Michael's flashlight landed on something in the corner, a large steel trunk, covered with dust. The lock had already been broken. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were dozens of photographs, several notebooks, and a small video camera. But what caught his attention most was a newspaper clipping folded neatly on top. The headline read, "Local man presumed dead after mountain disappearance." The article was about Daniel Carter. Michael quickly unfolded the paper. A photograph of Daniel stared back at him, and beneath the photo was a sentence that made both siblings go completely silent. Daniel Carter was last seen alive with his friends John Anderson and Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell, their mother's maiden name. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from above. A door slammed. The sound came from inside the cabin. Someone else had just entered. Michael and Emma immediately switched off their flashlights. The underground room fell into complete darkness. Above them, slow footsteps echoed through the cabin floorboards. Someone was moving from room to room. The siblings remained frozen, barely breathing. Another footstep, then another. Whoever was upstairs wasn't in a hurry. It was almost as if they were searching for something, or someone. Michael carefully peeked toward the staircase. A faint beam of light appeared at the top. Someone was shining a flashlight inside the cabin. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the air. Then a deep voice spoke. "I know you're here." Emma grabbed Michael's arm. Neither of them recognized the voice. A few seconds later, the footsteps started again. Closer this time. The person was
A heavy silence followed. We saw places we'd never visited, cities that didn't exist, people we'd never met, events from centuries ago. Michael felt goosebumps on his arms. That sounds impossible. Daniel laughed softly. I know. He reached into his jacket and removed an old photograph. The image was faded. He handed it to Michael. The photograph showed 4 young people standing near the cave entrance: John, Sarah, Robert, Daniel. But something else appeared in the background. A dark shape, standing inside the cave, watching them. Emma stared at it. Who's that? Daniel's face became pale. We don't know. The shape looked almost human. Almost. Its proportions were wrong. Its arms appeared too long. Its head slightly larger than normal. And despite the poor quality of the photograph, its eyes seemed unnaturally bright. Michael felt a chill. You never noticed it before? Daniel nodded. We didn't see it until the photo was developed. Nobody spoke. Then Daniel said something even stranger. The figure appears in every photograph taken near the sphere. Emma slowly lowered the picture. What happened after that? Daniel's expression darkened. For weeks, the visions got worse. What kind of visions? Daniel swallowed. Future events. Michael blinked. What? We started seeing things before they happened. The siblings exchanged looks. Daniel knew how unbelievable it sounded. I wouldn't have believed it either. He looked at Robert. Tell them. Robert hesitated, then nodded. The first vision showed a bridge collapse. Michael listened carefully. A few days later, the bridge actually collapsed. Emma stared. No way! Robert continued. Then another vision came true. And another. And another. The silence returned. Finally, Michael asked the question that had been bothering him. If all this is true, why did everyone keep it secret? Daniel's face hardened. Because after a while, the sphere changed. The wind suddenly stopped. The forest became eerily quiet. What do you mean? Emma asked. Daniel looked directly at her. At first, it showed us memories. Then he looked at Michael. Then it showed the future. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And eventually, it started showing us things that haven't happened yet. Michael frowned. Isn't that still the future? Daniel slowly shook his head. No. A strange fear appeared in his eyes. It showed us things that are never supposed to happen. Before anyone could respond, a loud vibration came from Daniel's pocket. His phone. He pulled it out. The screen lit up. The color drained from his face. What is it? Robert asked. Daniel stared at the message. Then he looked towards the mountains. The fear in his eyes had turned into terror. The cave? What about it? Daniel swallowed hard. Someone opened it. And somewhere deep within the mountains, far beyond the trees, a low rumbling sound echoed through the darkness. The rumbling continued for several seconds. At first, it sounded like distant thunder, but the sky above was clear. No storm clouds, no lightning, nothing. Everyone heard it. Daniel immediately grabbed his backpack. We have to leave, right now. Michael stepped in front of him. Not until you explain what's happening. Daniel looked frustrated. There isn't enough time. What opened the cave? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned towards the mountains. His hands were shaking. For the first time since meeting him, Michael realized Daniel wasn't acting like a dangerous man. He was acting like a terrified one.
A black SUV engine suddenly started nearby. Robert looked towards the road. "We can reach the mountain trail in 20 minutes." Daniel nodded. "Then move." Within minutes, all four of them were driving through the forest. Nobody spoke. The atmosphere inside the vehicle felt heavy. Questions filled Michael's mind. If the sphere was real, who had opened the cave? Why now? And why was Daniel so frightened? As the SUV climbed higher into the mountains, the sun slowly disappeared below the horizon. Darkness spread across the landscape. Eventually, they reached an old trailhead. The group continued on foot. The path was steep and rocky. After nearly an hour of hiking, they arrived at a narrow canyon hidden between towering cliffs. Daniel stopped. His expression changed. The canyon entrance had been sealed with metal gates years ago. Now, those gates were torn apart. Not cut, not blasted, torn, as though something incredibly powerful had ripped them from their foundations. Emma stared. What could do that? Nobody answered. The group entered the canyon. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Soon they reached the cave entrance. Michael immediately noticed something strange. The cave walls glowed faintly blue, not bright enough to illuminate the tunnel completely, just enough to reveal a strange shimmer running through the stone. Daniel looked horrified. It wasn't doing that before. The group moved deeper underground. The tunnel eventually opened into the massive chamber Daniel had described. Michael stopped breathing. The black sphere was real. It floated several feet above the ground, perfectly smooth, perfectly silent, and impossibly large. Blue light pulsed across its surface like waves moving through water. Emma whispered one word. "Wow." Then they noticed they weren't alone. A man stood near the sphere. He wore a dark business suit, silver hair, calm expression, almost as if he had been expecting them. Daniel's face instantly filled with anger. "You." The man smiled. "Hello, Daniel." Michael looked between them. "You know him?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." The stranger stepped forward. "My name is Victor Hayes." He looked directly at Michael and Emma. "Your parents never mentioned me about me, did they?" The siblings shook their heads. Victor chuckled. "Oh, they rarely mention old mistakes." Daniel clenched his fists. "What are you doing here?" Victor ignored him. Instead, he turned towards the floating sphere. "For 20 years, I've searched for this." Michael frowned. "You knew about it?" "Oh, yes." Victor's smile widened. "Long before your parents found it." The chamber suddenly vibrated. The sphere's blue glow intensified. A low hum echoed through the cavern. Victor seemed delighted. "It's finally awake." Daniel took a step backward. "No." Victor laughed. "You still don't understand what this is." The sphere began rotating slowly. The blue light became brighter and brighter. Shadows danced across the cave walls. Then symbols appeared across its surface, thousands of them, glowing in the air. None of them resembled any human language. Emma grabbed Michael's arm. "What is happening to us?" Nobody answered. The symbols began moving faster. The hum became louder. Suddenly, the air around the sphere rippled, like heat rising from asphalt. A circular opening appeared in front of it, a doorway, or perhaps a portal. Beyond it was darkness, not normal darkness, something deeper, something that seemed endless. Victor stared at it in amazement. "I knew it." Daniel looked terrified. "Close it." Victor laughed. "Why would I do that?" Then something moved inside the darkness. A shape, large, very large. Michael could barely breathe. The shape inside the darkness grew larger and clearer with every second. Then it stopped, just beyond the portal, watching them. No one spoke. Even Victor Hayes, who had seemed so confident moments earlier, looked uneasy. The creature's outline was unlike anything Michael had ever seen. It stood far taller than a human, yet its body seemed to shift and change whenever he tried to focus on it. It was as though his eyes couldn't fully understand what they were seeing. Daniel slowly backed away. "We need to leave." Victor shook his head. "No. You don't know what you're dealing with." "No," Victor replied. I think I finally do. The sphere suddenly emitted a bright pulse of blue light. The entire chamber flashed. For a fraction of a second, everyone saw the creature clearly, and that single glimpse was enough. Emma screamed. Robert staggered backward. Michael felt his knees weaken. The creature had no face. Where its face should have been was a constantly moving surface that looked like liquid shadows. Then the light vanished. Darkness returned. The creature remained inside the portal, waiting, watching. The sphere began producing strange sounds. At first, they seemed random. Then Michael realized they were becoming words. Not spoken words, words appearing directly inside his mind. The same thing happened to everyone else. A voice echoed through their thoughts. Access granted. The cave trembled violently. Return sequence initiated. Daniel's face turned white. No! Victor stared at the sphere. What does that mean? The voice continued. Original custodians located. Suddenly, a beam of blue light shot from the sphere and struck Michael. He cried out. A flood of images exploded inside his mind. Millions of stars, strange worlds, ancient cities, massive structures floating in space, civilizations rising and falling, thousands of years passing in seconds. Then one image appeared above all the others. Earth, seen from space. But it wasn't modern Earth. It was Earth thousands of years ago, and something was descending from the sky. A giant black sphere. The same sphere. Michael collapsed to the ground. Emma rushed to him. Michael!
You still don't understand, Victor laughed nervously. No, I understand perfectly. His eyes sparkled with obsession. This changes everything. Suddenly, he pulled a handgun from his coat. Everyone froze. Victor pointed it directly at the sphere. If I control this technology, I control the future. Robert said carefully, Don't. Victor ignored him. You've all spent 20 years hiding the greatest discovery in human history. The custodian turned toward Victor. Victor pointed the gun at it. Bad decision. Very bad decision. The custodian didn't move. It simply looked at him. A second later, the metal gun began glowing red. Victor screamed and dropped it. The weapon melted into liquid metal on the cave floor. The custodian returned its attention to the portal, as if Victor wasn't worth worrying about. Then Michael suddenly felt something, a new memory, or perhaps a warning. His eyes widened. No. Emma looked at him. What? Michael stared at the sphere. I know why the portal opened. Daniel immediately turned. You do? Michael nodded slowly. The custodians aren't invading. The entire cavern fell silent. They're evacuating. Nobody spoke. Even Victor looked confused. Evacuating from what? Emma asked. Michael's face became pale. The knowledge inside his mind had revealed one final truth, a truth that made the approaching custodians seem insignificant, because something else was coming, something the custodians themselves feared. Michael looked toward the portal and whispered, Something followed them across the stars. And far beyond the expanding doorway, hidden in the darkness between galaxies, an enormous pair of glowing eyes opened.